I guess every bit of weather this time of year is winter weather, but impacts from frozen precipitation and extreme cold are likely beginning as early as Friday and extending into next week. Consistency is key. It's the reason why at Tuesday at 6 p.m. we can solidly say that we have pretty good chances. We will get into the consistency and how that lines up for different types of precipitation for you coming up here in a couple of moments. And extreme cold is on the way for next week. I do want to bring in our meteorologist, Gabe Maynard, talking in particular about that consistency portion of this. And Gabe, again, that's going to be one of the main factors. We've got to make sure that we click back onto the switcher on that there. But one of the main factors, again, looking forward on this here is the fact that the models are going to be very consistent and where they are on the timing of that precipitation, of course, as well.
And timing mattering with temperatures, because if it's more at night, it's going to be colder. So there's a lot of factors whenever we're talking about consistency, and breaking that down coming up later in the broadcast. But that second headline is going to be the key to that winter weather potential.
And for what everyone is concerned with that, we'll talk to Gabe about that coming up here in a couple of minutes. But outside this evening, probably the most important graphic that I'm going to be able to show you is this one here that shows our winter threats. And again, the confidence is important on that. The only threat that's not high confidence at this point here is actually the middle one there, where we're talking about the heaviest rainfall being primarily to the south. Because warmer air trying to creep in here could shift some pretty heavy rainfall back into our area for a few locations. So that's why that remains a lower confidence level. But when we kind of look at this, the way to evaluate this here is, again, we're kind of mid-range on our confidence, to fairly high confidence, honestly, considering it's Tuesday. We're looking toward as early as Friday for accumulating snowfall and some ice and sleet out of this here. But we do feel highly confident there will be travel impacts around the region, and some folks will be stuck where they're at for a couple of days potentially on this. And that does mean sub-freezing temperatures extend that into next week. We could be talking about more than 3 days below the freezing point, and that's where pipes start to bust and we start to have issues there. That is starting later this week. Tonight we're ahead of that, and some of the first rain chances you can see starting to show up by 7 o'clock tomorrow morning on the first 12 here. We're 38 at 7 p.m., 31 degrees by 10 p.m., and then kind of hovering there a little below the freezing point for much of the overnight time period. And this could be high temperature territory as we head into the extended forecast. Out in Shelby, north of Cleveland, there in the Delta, one of those locations where you're going to have a mix that does include snow and ice and rain, all at different times. 45 this evening there. Smithville, one of those locations where warm air is going to try to eat some beautiful snowflakes into something else. But there's plenty of cold that will freeze something at some point, and that could obviously also be that frozen precipitation along with that. One of the main things that we are tracking there for Monroe County and other locations. And then outside in Macon, obviously, typically, Macon would be one of the spots most likely to see rainfall, and certainly that's on the table, but so is freezing rain and sleet and even still snowfall. It's still really early, and there's a lot of cold air with this storm system that could try to shove that again farther south. Alerts as we show them here as of the 6 o'clock hour. We do have winter storm warnings that have been issued for locations, winter storm watches for these locations back out there into Arkansas. That in effect, as you can see, expiring at 6 a.m. For Sunday. The thinking is that there will be upgrades to warnings. So watches come first. Watches are where we have ingredients that are coming into place, but they've yet to truly combine. And so that's kind of the precursor as we look ahead. Warnings, when we're upgraded, we expect impacts to become a lot more likely. So watches in effect for now. And these are likely to be expanded into our area as we progress into the latter part of, probably tomorrow. Maybe even tomorrow midday to morning, we're going to have those out, but watches will be issued. Only high thin clouds out there at this point. First of our couple of storm systems up here with primarily just really, really light snowfall. That's all this is there. Not a lot to work off of. What kind of works to help us to have more active weather? See back here toward the Pacific Ocean. You essentially have what amounts to kind of an upper level low pressure center way back there. And that is kind of sending with it little ripples of energy that kind of run ahead through a jet stream that's kind of running like this. And as those different ripples work toward us one at a time, they enhance the snowfall, the rainfall, and the icefall potential. But all those are going to probably start arriving maybe as early as midday Friday, but much more likely as we go late into that day there. So as we bring things in here and look at futurecast, again, the system number one, still kind of prepping things with moisture coming out of the Gulf. This is going to have some drier and slightly cooler air with it, but it's not the big cold blast that's sitting up there in Canada waiting to work toward us. This is slightly cooler. And so for the beginning of tomorrow, all that moisture still to the north and west, and a non-issue for us here across the Magnolia State to begin the day. But by around 5 to 6 o'clock, as many folks getting out there, more of that rainfall closer there to South Haven, back toward Pine Bluff and Greenville, spreading there toward around Calhoun City, perhaps. A few sprinkles by 9 a.m. More likely that works its way eastward as we progress throughout the day. So the next 24 hours, rain is the headline. And we expect to have maybe a rumble of thunder, but nothing terribly significant. We're solidly above the freezing point. So the percentages that you see here, well above the freezing point, this is all just rain, and luckily not storms of any significance. If you hear a rumble, you're, I guess, frankly lucky. Most of us won't see that. 49 the high temperature, and yes, everybody's going to school tomorrow. You're going to school for Thursday, probably in most cases going to school on Friday as well, but we are tracking, again, a time frame beyond that where many folks probably are not. Looking at this winter storm, what you can expect and when. We're going to look at that forecast consistency and break down everything related to this here from the Room to Room Weather Center as Mississippi Live Weather continues. Join the conversation on Facebook, on YouTube, on X. We'll be looking at that as well and answering your questions head-to-head, because the beauty of the 6 o'clock show, there's nothing coming up after it. So until we've answered those questions, we're not done. We'll see you in 60.
Look at Wanda, ready to rock her big presentation. But first, lunch. Sweet Pepper's Deli. Delicious, celebratory, but is it quick? The Cobb salad. Tender oven-roasted chicken, topped with cheese. Prepared, plated, and served in 6 minutes? Is this for real? Well, of course. Well done, Wanda. Sweet Pepper's Deli. Yes, ma'am, is sweet.
You may see a teen struggling to find his way. At Boys and Girls Clubs, we see a teen gaining the confidence and skills to land his first job. Kids today need people to see their potential and help them achieve it. At Boys and Girls Clubs, we do whatever it takes to help kids succeed. Because when we see young people, we see limitless possibilities. Do you? Join us, Boys and Girls Clubs. Great futures.
This portion of Mississippi Live Weather is presented by Little's Jewelers.
Right now, from the Room to Room Weather Center, here's Mississippi's Chief Meteorologist, Matt Lovehon.
And you're live here watching Mississippi Live Weather at 6 p.m. I'm Chief Meteorologist Matt Lovehon, looking for our camera in Mabin. This is one of those cameras provided by the North Mississippi Storm Chasers, but on one of the towers with a 4-county electric cooperative. I know the folks at 4 County watching things very closely, whether it's, Water Valley, whether it is, Tom Bigby Electric up here in, the Tupelo area where I'm at. I was talking to some folks, making sure the internet was up to snuff here earlier on today. They're wanting to know, are we going to be out there fixing power and bringing that back on? I think that for some folks, that is still a possibility, as both icing and snow and sleet potential all very much on the table and all very early on how much you could see. And I know sometimes, especially those the native iPhone app will show you, hey, here's how much snow you could see at your location. Those numbers are wrong. Those numbers will change drastically. I'd love to actually see you snap some pictures to show how those are going to evolve over the course of the next few days. But certainly anticipating that things are going to get a lot more tricky. Again, as we said at the beginning here, the alerts, winter storm watches already issued out in Arkansas, and we feel very strongly that expansion will occur into our area tomorrow. A watch comes before a warning. Watch means the ingredients are likely there. A warning means they've combined to produce something. And it's reasonable that most of us get placed under those winter storm warnings later this week as confidence increases. But again, we're still Tuesday, and we're talking way more about this than we typically do at this time frame out. Number one, because we can. But that's actually number two. Number one, because confidence is a lot higher than it typically is. We've showed this graphic a bunch. I'm going to show this again the next couple of days. 6 to 8 days out, hey, yeah, we're watching it. We might not be talking about it. 4 to 5 days in this point here, we're looking for consistency, and that's what's helped to increase confidence. That's what Gabe's discussing in more detail here in a couple of minutes there. As we're preparing the forecast, we have a pretty decent idea on timing. We have a decent idea on location. And totals, I have some ideas, but we're not going to get too deep into that because my ideas, your ideas, anybody's ideas outside of God's ideas are wrong at this point because we just don't have enough information at this time frame out. And obviously, as we get there right toward the beginning, that's when we can do specifics. I think we'll have better idea on some specifics, maybe a little farther out than that this time around. But everybody's going to school tomorrow. And I appreciate IMPC for sponsoring our school day forecast here. We're 32 degrees at drop-off tomorrow, 45 by lunch, and 49 with rain showers for tomorrow. And that is it. No wintry precipitation. Again, join the conversation here as our meteorologist Gabe Maynor and myself are continuing to watch our chat going on behind the scenes. But really, we're going to address this next couple of days first before we really dig into everything here. As you can see for tonight, we are ahead of really any issues. Winds out of the south bringing in more moisture. That moisture will start yielding better chances for rainfall as we progress throughout this week. And see still mainly back to the north and west of us, though, as we go throughout the overnight hours. We're in the lower 30s out there for many locations up here closer to Oxford, Senatobia. Our meteorologist Maggie McCauley, again, looking at mainly dry conditions even in the morning. She'll have updates starting tomorrow at 6:30 a.m. from 6:30, 7, and 7:30 a.m. I'll probably be joining her the next couple of days on the morning show, just popping in with opinions as we're kind of analyzing things and looking at things. We know that you're interested, and we'll be giving you updates. She'll be on 6:37, 7:30 a.m. I might make an appearance in that 7, probably closer to 7:30. I need to double check, make sure I have a haircut. Either way, Maggie will be there, and she'll be tracking the very latest there here in the Room to Room Weather Center, starting bright and early tomorrow morning on what will likely be, again, a cold but not frigid start to the day. And so showers increasing as we go here, 9, 10 o'clock in the morning. Not impossible to have a rumble. I think that's probably overstating things a little bit as these, again, showers kind of working their way in from the west here as we progress toward around midday and into the afternoon. Again, mainly green, as you can see here. Zero chance that we're talking about any kind of wintry precipitation because we're way above the freezing point. This initial wave, just rainfall. So temperatures 49 in Tupelo, go there for the afternoon high, about 51 degrees in Houston, 53 Eupora, 55 Kosciuszko, and this puts us a couple degrees below where we typically should be for this time of the year. So showers, again, increasing somewhat more in coverage into your Wednesday evening. This front kind of kicking through our area and does try to kind of keep the moisture locked away a little bit to the south of us for maybe a day or so. Really, one of the questions is, if this really truly scrapes all the moisture right on out of here, that delays the onset of meaningful rainfall. Because essentially, if we have enough dry air there, what initially could be some snowflakes trying to fall on Friday gets eaten up by drier air. So that's why how far this scrapes that moisture south and east is a huge impact on how this all ends up playing out. But as you can clearly see, rainfall, we're going to have that overnight leading into early Thursday morning. Thursday's lows, low 40s, upper 30s. We're going to look at the extreme cold in the extended forecast coming up in the last block of this broadcast here. But that's not a factor for your Thursday and really this work week as we're still ahead of that there. So man, it's hard for me to ignore some of these comments from time to time. That's showing, the potential, again, that we'll talk about here in a minute for the ice plus snow potential. A lot of what you've seen on social media is not correct because warm air is going to mess that up for some of us and not for others. So rainfall, it's all still warm air. We're all still ahead of everything. We're all still, trying to dry things out as we progress into your Thursday. You can see, again, some spotty showers out there, but mostly dry conditions even into the afternoon as a little bit of that moisture starts coming back northward out of the Gulf of Mexico. Thursday's high is expected to be in the upper 40s, low 50s. Again, normal this time of year, 53 degrees. You can see above my head there. We're mainly going to be either side of that. This is really pretty close to what we typically expect. And then our next storm system starts bringing in slightly more moisture. Again, we are getting you probably to school just fine on Wednesday, Thursday, and probably Friday morning, we're above the freezing point here. 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning, some isolated showers. Now, I need to be honest with you. Sometimes when we get these little bit of warm air advection showers in the front end of a system like this, you get a rogue sleep pellet on this. If we're getting sleep pellets on that, that's one of those things that always makes me have a knee-jerk reaction and start worrying as a meteorologist. Typically, though, if that happens, it's short-lived. The more meaningful, active wintry precipitation still off to the west of us at that point and time as we're still trying to saturate things. We're going to show you temperatures layered on with everything else. That's kind of the critical thing on how Friday plays out. But we're starting off above freezing. I mean, even up here in the far northern part of the state, we're 33 Boonville and Corinth. We are down to the freezing point there, Holly Springs, perhaps Natobia close to that, as well as South Haven and Tunica to begin the day. So those are folks more open to see maybe some wintry stuff earlier. But I think temperatures probably increase just a little bit. Here's a look at our futurecast temperatures. Note how, again, I'm a little warmer on some of these numbers than what I showed you just a second ago. That's because if we rip the raw model output there from our strike model, it's warmer. And it's warmer because we have that moisture coming out of the Gulf of Mexico. So as we progress into your Friday here, notice how temperatures are going to be in a fight for what's going to end up happening. So we're here at, say, 10 a.m., and we have some spots maybe cold enough to support some wintry stuff up here near the Tennessee state line. But for most of us, what might actually be starting off as flakes aloft melts into something else here as we progress through the morning. Now we're here toward midday. Again, mainly rainfall. And even where we show some snowfall up here, Boonville back toward New Albany and Oxford, it's pretty light, number one. And it's probably largely melting before it gets to the surface, number two. So, do we know for sure we're not going to have snowfall before the kids get out of school on Friday? No. But I'm very suspect on what we're looking at on this. This is one of those things we will find greatly the next couple of days is the onset of precipitation. But the thing you'll note looking at these numbers, we're looking for 32 and below. That would be the freezing point. That'd be below the freezing point. We're going to see this. Most locations are 32 and above during the day on Friday, which is why as we lose the sunlight, as we lose the heating of the day, that's when we start shifting more into snow, more into mix, more into everything else as we progress into your Friday evening. We will talk more with Snow Finder, Rain Finder, and look at our confidence and ice potential. We'll dig into all your questions related to this here in a second. But before we move on, I don't want to miss this. Regardless of what falls, travel impacts are probable starting Friday, as you can see there at the top, Friday night, and extending through the weekend, and in some cases in the next week. This is not our typical snow setup. This is not, well, this might be closer to an ice storm, typical ice storm setup, which is why I'm very cautious when talking about snowfall potential. That's why we're not a higher confidence level on either of those. So impacts are likely, and we expect those impacts to stay around because of sub-freezing temperatures. More on these here in a moment. Look at these lows. By Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, really cold air in place. We'll talk a lot more about that in a minute. But even if you're ignoring that for a moment, look at the high temperature. Only 28 on Saturday. And some spots will be warmer than that. Some spots will be above freezing. And that's where that contrast comes in. But 28 Sunday, 30 Monday, that means we stay below freezing for the more than 3 days, probably from late Friday into Tuesday for some locations. It is a deep freeze, it is cold, and that's going to bust pipes. That's going to cause other issues. And as Kim says next to me there, let's all pray for just snow and absolutely no ice. That's not a bad prayer because the ice potential is absolutely there. In 60 seconds, we will break down all of how this will play out and answer your specific questions related to this as Mississippi Live Weather continues here from the Room to Room Weather Center in 60 seconds. Again, support those sponsors you see there and on the commercials that support us here on Mississippi Live Weather. It's how we get to keep doing this right after this.
I don't remember how it started.
Go to that.
Our back and forth. It always came back. Dad! You probably don't remember what you told me.
That was perfect.
But I heard every word.
Whether it's our stories, the warmth of our laugh, or our family's secret sauce, we all bring something different to the table. So make some space. The power of connection is waiting right outside your comfort zone. Learn how you can help strengthen your community at belongingbeginswithus.org/teamup.
Welcome back to Mississippi Live Weather. I'm Chief Meteorologist Matt Lawpon. This is future temperatures. And as far as impacts goes, one of the most impactful things with this is just how cold it is and how long it stays that cold. And so going forward, as you can see here, starting Friday and Friday late in the day, this particular projection, our GFS model, gets us down into the teens for early Saturday morning. This sets us up near the surface with really, really cold temperatures. Gabe, another thing we need to add to our list, we need to make something where we overlay the warm temperatures on top of this cold temperatures here so we can show that nose of warm air aloft. I think that would be a great explainer on kind of the snow eater portion of this that we'll talk about. And again, join the conversation here. I'll pop that kind of back up here. We leave that up a little more this week than we typically do during our broadcasts. But look at this as we go into Saturday. As this shows for most of us, temperatures, again, not just below freezing, but 10 degrees below freezing much of the day. Now, if this were to play out, that's a scenario where everything is frozen at the surface as long as it didn't melt at some point above us. And so that is the reason when you look at these really extreme snowfall totals, it's like, hey, this is really cold near the surface and we just happen to be cold enough aloft. And so now we're talking big numbers because it's, you know, that the ratio of how much moisture it takes to get snowflakes is higher when you're colder, when it's a kind of a drier snow. Now notice how this keeps us into, and even there, you can still just kind of see it. See that color blue, that kind of darker blue shifting northward here? That is that warmer air even near the surface, what we call the warm conveyor, trying to bring warmer air aloft and at the surface in to try to eat into some of those snowfall totals. It's showing up there. Hopefully that then doesn't end up being an issue, but as you can see into Sunday, this shows temperatures, at least on this projection, struggling to make it out of the mid-20s. And then that's when the freezer effect starts occurring. You can see we're low teens out there for early Monday on this particular projection, only upper 20s for highs. And then by early Tuesday morning, actual temperatures here, this is GFS, bring Gabe in, let's talk about this, and let's talk about the consistency related to this. Gabe, that is miserable. And again, as the kids say, that's I'm going to pop it up behind you here for a moment. That's just a projection, not a forecast, right? Just a model run, not a forecast is what all the jailbirds say online.
Yeah, let's hope it doesn't get consistent on this.
The problem is Euro was like -8 this morning, right?
Yeah.
This is what happens when you have a ton of snowfall in the model, and the model's like, well, if there's snow, we don't heat up as much, and you get this like overwhelming kind of cold chilling effect, or freezer sort of effect with it. This is probably overdone, but that's really cold, and the issue is that's a scenario where you're busting pipes, and you could see not getting above freezing that day, and then possibly Tuesday night into Wednesday not getting above freezing. We're talking about if you are fortunate, depending on your perspective, to get stuck where you're at, you're probably dealing with those issues for a while. And God bless those linemen and women and people to go out there and try to take care of it. This is rough because this says Tuesday 7 p.m. and this is the difference a week makes. And that's when we're starting to go on the mend. You're looking at forecast consistency, and in particular, obviously what some of they're showing, run to run. Let's take a look at that and let's talk about that.
Yeah, so basically what we're starting out with, we're going to talk a lot about consistency here at 6 o'clock, starting with the start time. As you looked at GFS a moment ago, and there was some potential for some sub-freezing temperatures, you can kind of see where that frozen precipitation starts to work into the forecast. And one of the biggest notes is time frame. This is noon on your Friday and getting kind of a slushy mix potential up there towards the northwest part of the viewing area. Now, here's why confidence is not high. And some of you may have said, Gabe, why did you laugh at 10 a.m. at 5 o'clock? Here's why. GFS, it has it. But if we look at Euro, non-existent whenever it comes to that moisture in the area. So very limited on that aspect. And we'll talk why here in just a moment, but already showing a difference in regards to one model run to the next. Now, if we look at all the different model runs, and I'm going to drag it out and you can kind of see the difference as each one comes out. Look at how many actually have frozen precipitation in the area. Right now I'm counting 1. Maybe 2. I mean, we could maybe mention that there's some up there towards DeSoto County by noontime on the RRFS model. But nonetheless, that's one model that we feel confident with that one model that it's going to put it out. Now, that's just one of the 10 models I just showed. So that's why exactly.
So the good news on that basically is that basically the onset of it looks to be later in the day on Friday. All the early model stuff is a lot less likely. It's later.
Yes, and so whenever folks are asking, am I going to school on Friday? Tupelo put out a notice earlier today basically saying, you know, they're watching it and tracking it just in case anything needs to be done. I would say the morning commute, it's going to happen, but by the afternoon, that's where there's still some questions in regards to potentially a shortened day or maybe wrapping up those afternoon activities, one of which I feel like is a decent potential if everything continues to line up how we expect it to. And you know, Matt, I'm going to change it over.
I think I always caution administrators to wait a little longer because if I'm an administrator, I'm not making that decision now. I'm not making that decision tomorrow. I'm probably not making that decision until late Thursday. That's when our confidence will be higher on the onset. Onset's going to be one of the tricky parts on the front end of this on how it plays out. Go ahead.
For sure. Well, and what I was going to do is move it 6 hours ahead. And now we're talking 6 p.m. on your Friday night. And there's some of that wintry mixture over there towards Arkansas trying to work its way into North Mississippi. If we look at each model run, there's some frozen precipitation on the GDPS. GFS showing that same thing. Icon even a little bit showing up as well. So it's a little bit more consistent by 6 p.m. And so that shows us the timing that we're kind of looking at is going to be that late afternoon, early evening time frame with how things are working out right now as there's a little bit more consistency model run to model run. But now, what we're going to do, and Matt, feel free to intervene at any point if there's any questions in the chat to go over any of this. But what I want to do real quick is go over how the latest model runs have trended. As we talked about earlier on, I mean, way early into the start of this week and really around Saturday and Sunday, not exactly forecasting any winter weather. So this has gradually increased in confidence as we've gone model run to model run. Let's go ahead and track that out. So here we're still looking at the 18th, those different model runs coming out of the GFS. And as you can kind of see how this has trended, I mean, just starting to work that moisture more and more into the area. But watch over the last few runs what we've been seeing. So there you're getting a little bit more of that moisture building in with, again, that wintry mix. And this is the 19th at 12Z. And then as we get to 18Z, 0Z, that's remaining right overhead. So that was where it was a little bit more consistent with pushing that moisture in early. And again, this is 18Z. This is noon with the GFS. But watch the last few runs. Starting to retreat just a bit. All the way back into Arkansas with the 12Z run. Now 18Z trying to move it back into the area. So seeing some change in time frame as we've gone model run to model run, but that retreat from 0Z all the way through 12Z was a little bit more encouraging to where we'd get a later start with this, and GFS trying to get a little bit more aligned on that. But that's what we were watching with that specific trend. Now let's go to our European model. And again, we're going model run to track this out, starting with the 17th. And as we go across this, you can kind of see how that moisture works its way into the forecast a little bit by a little bit, but still very isolated in nature and still primarily just rainfall. Keep that moving into the 18th and now the 19th, and you can see where it's had hints of that winter precipitation over in Arkansas, but as we've gotten further into the forecast, it's just not exactly as moist of an atmosphere with the European model. And so it's kind of flip-flopping as well with that time frame, but again, that's why we're expecting a later time start more into the afternoon and evening rather than that morning threat that the strike model was trying to throw on at 5 o'clock. Big reason why we don't believe it's going to be any winter concern for the morning and midday time frame for Friday. temperatures. Let's go ahead and track this out. And this is again looking at 12 p.m. with the European model that we just looked at a moment ago. And we're going to watch how this has trended. So right now you're seeing the 17th. Watch how things have gotten cooler, but overall we've remained right around the low to mid 40s, and that's been pretty consistent the last few runs. So what we're seeing there is it's still just too warm. One note, that cold air on especially that 0Z run that came out earlier today, you can see how that cold sector does try to move into the area just a bit, but then the next one comes out and the warm air still dominates the forecast. So by noontime, European just too warm. One of the many reasons why it's not showing any of that wintry mix. But as we get into the GFS model, back into our American model, watch how these temperatures have trended. Gotten colder and colder and colder and colder. As that cold air has moved in, confidence has increased to try and get some of that wintry mix into the forecast, but there we're kind of sitting in the low to mid 30s. So there's a big difference already being seen between the GFS and the European, is that the European is drastically warmer. So that little bit of a change is reassuring because there is at least one minor difference that we're looking at, and that keeps our confidence slightly less. I mean, it's still there, but that difference could impact the timing that we expect it to move into the area. And that's one of the big questions heading into tonight, into Wednesday, into Thursday, before that main day comes into play. And as we take a look at some of those trends, of course, one of the big things that we're looking at with the GFS, and this is the latest 18Z run, you can see how this has, I'm going to get clicked right there, and we're going to drag this out. Kind of see how it's scattered showers for the next couple of days, and as we work into that extended pattern, there we're getting that cold air, and we're talking noontime, and there you're getting that cold air already starting to interact with that upper atmosphere, allowing for some of that wintry mix to move into play. And the concern becomes, how long does it stick around for? Because as you can see on our American model, it's going to go well into Saturday, it's going to go well into Saturday afternoon, and continuing into Saturday night. And a large part of that is purple. That's going to be some of that frozen precipitation, whether that's freezing rain or sleet. One of the concerns that we're looking at, but up around the Tennessee state line, a lot of blue showing up. That's where that colder air is going to be overhead, even with some of those mid-level layers that we'll look at here in just a moment. So carrying that over into the forecast, we're tracking that into the potential for Sunday morning as well before that winter weather moves out of the area, but then the real cold moves in, and that's where we're, of course, going to be dealing with an extreme freeze beyond that point and dangerous temperatures whenever we're looking at the grand scheme of things. Now, European, like we talked about a moment ago, still getting that into the forecast Friday night, Saturday morning, and still going to be some pretty significant impacts. As we drag this out, you can see how long this sticks around for. We're talking, this is Saturday night by midnight, and then into your Sunday once again before that threat carries on out by your Sunday afternoon. So this could potentially, if these long track models continue to verify themselves, we're talking about a 24 plus hour event where we're getting some of that frozen mix in the area. What that's going to do is cause travel concerns. As Matt was mentioning, that's the impacts that we expect right now. Accumulated totals, not exactly something we can nail down as of this point, and anything you do see on social media is a guess based off of these models. So we're not going to exactly give you an accumulating total, but we can tell you that it is going to be impactful, whether that's with travel, whether that's with any plans on your weekend. Got a lot of questions about D-Nows happening with church and whether they should reschedule. I would say if you don't want to be on the road in this mess, then don't put your kids at risk either. And so go ahead and move that if need be. And there are plenty of other weekends that we can go ahead and get those done where we're not tracking a wintry mess like what we'll have this weekend. And speaking of that, a few more questions talking about potential for school next week. Again, we don't make that call, but we will have that list on our website heading into the latter part of this week and early part of next week. And Matt, you have the way that they can do that, right?
There's a way using the Mississippi Live weather app. You'll be able to.
No, it is. Okay, my IFB's dead.
Yeah. That's fine. I'll go ahead and bring it back here for a moment. So using the Mississippi Live weather app, we're going to show Snow Finder in a minute, but I want to show you Snow Hater here in a moment. Snow Eater. Maybe that's what we need to call it. Anyway, we're going to show you what could make this more ice and how that all kind of works in here in a second. But using the Mississippi Live weather app, we have a place on there for school closings. Administrators, we'll talk more about this next couple of days, probably do a Facebook Live specifically kind of talking about that. There will be a way on the website where administrators can submit your closings, and we have some authorization, some other cool tricks in there that our web developer put in there so that only the administrators' stuff will actually get to us, and then we will approve those. So if you just If Joe Blow tries to cancel school in Starkville, it's not going to happen. I'm going to have your email, and then I'm going to send it to the administrator and say, hey, look who's trying to cancel school today. So we will have those closings, things like that, as necessary. But there will be no closings Thursday, no closings Wednesday, and pretty decent chance there's no closings Friday on the front part of the day. We will see how it goes a little bit later on. Okay, I'm going to show you Snow Eater. And so, man, why'd that play pretend here? Let's try this again. You're gonna get to watch me try to get the right display on here. So let's play. Nope, that is definitely wrong. That is wrong. Also wrong. Still wrong. Still wrong. But there we are. Last try. It's always the last one you try. So this is what we're going to show as Snow Eater. So this is basically, let's see here. So this is about 1,500 meters above the surface. So you're talking about a mile above the surface. Snow should already be falling at that height. This is looking here in the pre-dawn hours of early Saturday morning. That's what you see at the top here. The line I'm showing you is the freezing line there. Hold on, I'm gonna change viewpoints on this. I want to make sure that one keeps popping up. I want to try this one because that should have counties. I thought that have counties on it. Okay. Well, let's come back into the floater then. So this line you see right there, maybe you can see it, maybe you can't see it there. That specific line is the edge of the freezing point aloft. And so that means everything below this, and I'm going to keep this exact same time there. So it's 90 hours. And we're going to show you surface temperature at that time. So we show that temperature, it's like, oh, well, look at this. Right there, if you kind of keep my finger, this is the freezing point. And on this particular projection, that would put that as far south as, say, Macon, right? South of Columbus is about where we show that freezing point. So I'm going to keep my hand there. And then I'm going to go back up to where we were aloft and show you the temperature. We get it right there. About 2 counties north. This is what takes pretty snow, melts it, only for it to get refrozen by temperatures that are colder at the surface. This is why ice and sleet are on the table. Is if that layer aloft is warm enough, long enough, what starts as snow completely melts into rain, refreezes, we've got ice storm, we've got issues. So that's where the ice component of this comes in, is because of the warmer temperatures aloft. And the depth of that warm layer is important. Because if I show 925 millibars, we're not super high above the surface, but a little above the surface, we're below freezing. So that's a fairly decent cold layer there. 700 millibars, we should be below freezing, and we are. So it's just this, at about that mile and a half up, this little warm layer there. And if we go back to the beginning of this event, here's early Friday. This would be 10 a.m. Friday, noon Friday. This is showing up, that would be 3 p.m. Friday towards 6 p.m. Friday. Notice how at that point here, this is about where our line is. I wish I could telestrate on this. I bet I could. I just have to ask Dan that question at some point here. I've just never built it in. Anyway, so let's now go and watch how that line starts pushing a little bit northward by the pre-dawn hours of early Saturday morning. This is the icing situation we get concerned about, because whatever's falling is below freezing at the surface and above freezing aloft. And see how that warm area kind of shifts northward going into the late part of Saturday? This is our Snow Eater. Let's look at multiple projections here. This is our European projection, one that I put in the chat a little bit ago. I'm a European apologist. I will always apologize for that. GFS is a little farther south, but you see the same shape there. Again, we're too far ahead here. You know, a lot's going to change, but the indication is here that even in some of our other projections, that warm layer is fairly far north here late Saturday. That's where icing becomes a problem. Is we've now taken beautiful snowflakes and we've melted them into something else. Because even in these other projections there, if I go back down, let's see if this will take me down if I get surface temperature on this. Surface temperature low comparison. There we go. So you can see on GFS, whereas we were all the way up here with that warm layer, at the surface, freezing points all the way down here past Tuscaloosa, I mean practically Hattiesburg, right? Yet aloft, it's warmer than freezing if you go up. That is our problem. And that's where the icing potential and all the other stuff that people worry about comes from related to that. It's still early. We don't know that's the way this is going, but almost every time warm air ruins beautiful snow memories. So let's, hope that's not the case. But as you can see, what is consistent here is every one of our projections has the cold air at the surface way farther south and then warmer air aloft way farther north, taking snow, melting it into something else, and trying to refreeze it into something closer to the surface. So, with that in mind, that's where we're going to bring you over to Ice Finder. Ice Finder is something you can find only here on Mississippi Live. And as I cue that up for you here, let's show you what it's showing. We had this at 5 o'clock. Let's spend a good deal of time, hopefully, answering some questions. And before Jacob says ice storm of 94 there, I'll go ahead and pop the chat back up so we can see that as well. Here's what I would say related to that, Jacob. 94 was historic because of the amount of precipitation. You had inches and inches of rain that fell, just liquid precipitation fell. I'm going to show you some rainfall accumulations related to this here in a minute as well, so we can kind of talk through that. But let's look on Ice Finder here, and you'll notice there's nothing for the next couple of days as we kind of prep. Even through early Friday, there's nothing. Even through late Friday, there's not really much. Because while we have, again, what's likely largely snow aloft that'll be falling at that point in time, we don't have that same warm air aloft. That starts arriving as we go into Friday night and Saturday, and that's why it's almost like you flip a switch. And then there, by the pre-dawn hours of early Saturday morning, we show increasing confidence in icing potential out of this. That does include Greenville. It does extend through much of North Mississippi. Now, I'm gonna tell you all day long, ignore the colors here. And I know somebody's going to be paying very, very close attention to that. I'm not going to stop you from doing that. But notice how our confidence in ice diminishes as we go into the afternoon. That is largely because of how far out this is. By 5:30 Saturday, so 5:30 Friday, 5:30 Thursday, 5:30 Wednesday, 5:30 Tuesday, we're 4 full days away. So that's the main reason confidence is decreasing at this point in time. It's not necessarily anything we're looking at other than time tends to adjust how confident we are on where that warmer air aloft is. And if there'll be just a little bit colder, because a few degrees colder and all of a sudden this is great snow and this is lots of snow. It's the numbers that the iPhone's kicking out on snowfall totals, not our app, but the iPhone app, versus this, which nobody wants to see. So confidence is not high, but even though this is a low confidence scenario here, obviously it's a high impact scenario, and that's the concern. Gabe is in front of them. Come back to Ice Finder here in a second. But what Gabe has there is what we call a skew T log P, or sometimes we'll call it a sounding. And Gabe, that sounding there, kind of shows the it's kind of like a silhouette for the atmosphere there, and you can see all the things poking out and that you don't want to deal with there. But in particular, it's that little nose. Point out the warm nose there, and the issues related to that.
Yeah, so
right there.
I pulled
so
three
that is
soundings.
kind of that.
Well, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, basically, what I was going to say is I pulled 3 soundings, and it's all from different types of precipitation here in North Mississippi. And of course, you can guess what the first one is. It's rain. Even though it's cold at the surface, this little warm nose that you're talking about, once it crosses this blue line, which is the freezing line, that's where we.
Oh, Gabe, you got to tell us straight. We paid all that money for that thing. Can you zoom it in a little more? Before you do that?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're going to have to clear that after doing it. We'll zoom it in super duper far. And then Gabe's going to do the thing that I can't do back here.
I consider it a privilege.
Is it not letting you do it?
It will. I just got to redo it. So let me close this out. And there we go. Okay. So what you have, there we go.
Draw in the 0 degree isotherm.
So let me get blue. And that's going to be right there.
So everything to the right of that is above freezing. Everything to the left of that is below. And so as you can see, the last, couple miles below the surface is all above freezing and thus rain, right?
Exactly. Yeah, this is 700 millibars and below. You're basically seeing above that freezing mark. And as you mentioned, a couple miles, once you put a snowflake through, not even a mile, it's enough to melt it and, of course, not be a pretty snowflake anymore. So this is the first precipitation type as we move into this forecast. It's going to be rain, and this was pulled from a portion south using our GFS model, but we have more to show whenever we're talking about that potential. Let me pull that up behind the scenes.
Okay, so ultimately we call that a sounding there. This would be like if we sent a weather balloon up through it. Everything on the left is below freezing, everything on the right is above freezing, and when the green and the red are overlapped with one another, the green on top of the red there, that's where we're at saturation, where we have enough moisture. So you could see kind of the dry layer above aloft there, and then obviously we have the saturation layer there where we have all the clouds that are, largely above freezing.
Yes, and the green and the red, it's worth noting that those are the dew points. And so, or the dew point and the temperature. The red is the temperature, green dew point. When those two things line up, like we've talked about oftentimes with fog or a saturated forecast, usually those two numbers are the exact same. Basically, that's the case, but all the way up through the atmosphere. So next SKU-T log T that we're going to look at is a freezing rain / sleet potential, and big reason why, and I will illustrate once again and show you that 0 degree isotherm. Let me get my blue marker here. Right there. There's where you see it, and you may see that there is I got a little wobbly up top, but there's a slight area where we do get above that freezing mark. And what happens there is this beautiful snowflake that we're getting higher up into the atmosphere warms up slightly above that freezing mark, and even 33 degrees is enough to melt it. That's where we start to get that melting that takes place, starts falling as a rain droplet, but then we have that freezing temperature at the surface. Now, if there is enough room to freeze it before it reaches the surface, then we're getting that sleet potential. But if it doesn't have the time in order to freeze before it reaches the ground, that's where we're looking at freezing rain, with temperatures being at 28 degrees. But one of the big notes with this, and another thing that I love seeing in SKU-T log T graphics, is right here. What you have right there is the dendritic growth zone. So let me say this, in a saturated sounding, if it is below freezing, we also need that zone in order for a snowflake to form. You often heard that snowflakes are called, dendrites. Well, the dendritic growth zone makes sense. That's where the snowflakes form, and that's where they happen, and it's in a saturated area high up in the atmosphere where it is a very cold forecast. But like I said, even if it crosses that 0 degree isotherm, that's where we do get that melting that takes place and then turns into frozen precipitation rather than it being the beautiful, what's the word I'm looking for? The beautiful snowflake. But then we have the snowfall forecast. Let me pull this up behind the scenes and get ready to illustrate on it, because if I clear things out here, we're going to get the new sounding. And this one is taken from a little bit up north, up there right across the Tennessee state line. And where we get that, let's go ahead and look at that 0 degree isotherm, because one of the big notes in that forecast is, of course, that the 0 degree isotherm is all to the right of that dew point and temperature line. What that means is it stays below freezing the entire way down, and we also have that dendritic growth zone up there in the upper atmosphere. So we have that area where it's a saturated area where the dendrites can form, and as they fall, they remain below freezing despite it being kind of that curved section right there, all of that below that 0 degree isotherm. So it remains in flake form from top to bottom, even all the way here on the ground. But of course, this does depend on location. This one being pulled a little bit up north shows that it's a saturated sounding, but just depends on where you're at for what type of precipitation you're going to be getting. So that's kind of the science behind it. I love looking at these whenever it comes to severe weather or winter weather, because it kind of tells you what to expect with the forecast. And oftentimes what I look for is how far are we going to be to the right of that 0 degree isotherm, because that's going to tell me what type of precipitation is going to be happening. And if it is below freezing at the surface, that means that ice potential is a little bit higher. So this is that snowfall forecast. We just tracked that freezing precipitation forecast and, of course, the rain forecast, all of which are possible heading into that extended pattern. But yeah, this is going to be an interesting setup, as Matt was mentioning, with that snow eater forecast. That's a good way to put it, because it does eat at that snow potential, whether it's frozen precipitation or not. I mean, it takes one sounding for it to be a snowflake, and that's the one you see behind me right there.
Yeah, exactly. Everything else where it's not saturated, where it's not below freezing, is all the different ways snowballs turn into slush or ice that then turns into power outages and all the other things related to that. So again, thank you, Gabe. Appreciate that. Very good discussion. We've had some questions coming around behind the scenes here that I'm going to go ahead and address. One of those being, someone was asking, do we need to let faucets drip in the tub? And that comes down to is like, this is an outside wall on my house. So anything that would be on this outside wall here would need to have a little bit of a drip going just to make sure that you didn't have some kind of an issue. If your sink is coming from the island in the middle of your kitchen, you don't have to worry about that. Unless you have a conventional foundation and air can get beneath your house and cool it down that way. So again, there's always a little bit of something that kind of figures into this as well. But ultimately, I'd say that the big thing to keep in mind is, you want to be watching those faucets on outside walls. And someone mentioned NWS Memphis does a great job. All the National Weather Service offices, I think around here, we were very blessed to have a bunch to do a great job here. So back to Ice Finder for a minute. That's the reason why, when you saw what Gabe said a second ago and talking about all those different ways where a little bit of warm air messes it up, that's why here on Ice Finder we have such significant numbers trying to show up on here. Because, let's be crystal clear. If you're counting pinks here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9-ish colors of pink in, that's not something friendly up there. And that is a combination of not just freezing rain, but also some snow that mix in back and forth, and then also sleet that mixes in with that. So not all of this ends up on trees and power lines, but some of this does. And especially if what we were looking at on some of the projections is true, significant icing and power outage and tree damage potential is there. So positioning on this will absolutely change. This is not yet a high confidence forecast, as we showed you. It still remains fairly low confidence on positioning, but the impacts related to it obviously would be very significant. So let's look at Snow Finder. Again, something you can find only here on Mississippi Live. If you watched us last night, you know that we talked about, again, the peak range here for the most significant snowfall to the north of us with relatively low confidence. Notice as we go into your Friday here, confidence back for the plains. To calibrate this here, where you see the darker kind of reds and purples, very high confidence of something happening. So very, very high confidence of snowfall back on the plains with this. And for us at 6 p.m. Friday, the confidence in snowfall remains much more limited. As you can see, the confidence, while this has the potential maybe for a little bit, we're here with this green, which would be honestly 10% confidence. So it's not high, right? It's kind of like winning the lottery. High impact if it happens, very low odds of it happening. Same thing here. Low odds of this happening as early and getting accumulating snowfalls early as Friday evening, but Friday night, watch how things change. As we go into the overnight hours, the odds of us seeing the snowfall increasing dramatically. And the only reason this isn't higher again is because this is farther out. If this was the day before, our confidence would be massively higher on this. But we expect those wiggles, and we expect that warm air is going to really kind of mess up some of the snowfall. That's, again, some of the things holding back confidence at this point. Expect us tomorrow to have higher confidence level as we go forward with this and we get closer, but certainly the confidence much, much greater up here into Tennessee for accumulating snowfall. And yes, I know we can all read scales. The numbers there get fairly significant. So again, something you can see only on Mississippi Live. Notice how this also still has some accumulating snowfall down here, back out there toward Philadelphia and Kosciuszko. But have you ever even seen the 10% confidence line getting that far south? No. So possibility, but low confidence. Makes sense, hopefully? Our peak time frames, though, what you can kind of glean from this is going to be into the overnight hours leading into Saturday, through the day Saturday, and then possibly again into early Sunday. The thing is that warm air aloft is really going to mess a lot of this up. That's why the confidence is so low south here of Tupelo, Amory, Columbus. We're much more likely for most of our area to find ourselves with an ice situation and all of the impacts that go along with that. Unfortunately. Let's talk rainfall amounts. This is important because the amount of moisture we see is kind of critical to the narrative, and I've already heard some people saying it. We're going to have more people saying it. What about 94? I just said it. So 94 was incredible because of how much moisture you had total. And look, we have a significant amount of moisture, as this shows throughout this event. But watch where you have it the most significant there. 2.8 inches it shows of moisture, total liquid moisture there in Columbus. But I can slice off the first 61 hundredths of that from the initial rainfall that occurs. But that does mean on this particular projection, this is the European there, that's a lot of moisture. That's a lot of liquid. And if that were all ice, and it won't be, but if that were all ice, that's a big, big problem. But again, hear me say it, that won't be. Dear God, I hope it's not. Now you start looking at the GFS, and for the period of time where this is producing ice, we go from somewhere around a ½ inch for that initial round to by the time we're done with the moisture here, some of which will, be again rainfall and other things. Liquid moisture, this is a lot. But this is not our standard snow setup, which makes confidence very low in my mind on high-end ice. That is still very much a possibility. But confidence in it remains, my confidence remains low because of that. Let's look at a wider shot here. We're going to look at kind of the US view here for a moment because I can show you some other things. I want to show you looking at wind speeds aloft. Do you see how we have what we call zonal flow? I basically have winds aloft that are straight from west to east, right? These arrows, these flags all point the direction it's going. They're all from west to east. This is not what snow usually looks like for us. Snow usually looks like one of those digging up and kind of churning on through. I wouldn't typically show 250. I'd probably show 500 for that. So let's look at 500. Let's look at vorticity. And I don't have that. What I have here is kind of worst case scenario on high level predictability on timing. And that is what we call channeled vorticity. You see how you kind of have these highways, these lines here, and these little blips of energy are peeling off of our system back there toward the Baja of California. And the little blips are just kind of flowing. When do they get here? Great question. Nobody knows. Nobody will know. And that's why timing, specific timing for snow or the beginning of it remains a bit of a question. But there clearly are lots of these little bits of energy, little bits of lift kind of coming over top of us all the way through there. And this is on this particular, what we call GFS model, until it really kind of breaks down heading into practically Monday. There's still lift. If there's still moisture, that combination would produce, obviously, the active weather that we're talking about here. But the fact that we have kind of a perfectly kind of west-to-east highway reduces our timing, timing confidence, because we don't have a real solid piece of this just breaks off and moves in. So that's why models are everywhere on this. They're like, there's just so much lift, I can't even think straight in just wide open Gulf of Mexico. And listen, that's a problem, because we look at, if you may, 700 millibar. Yeah, you can see it kind of this way. Let's come in closer again. Come to there we are. So plenty of moisture kind of moving directly kind of west to east through the area with just little ripples. But I'm going to go down closer to the surface. Go 850 dew point. You can kind of see that at 850, but not really. That doesn't show up very well on there. So I might have to go down to 925. Theta E is going to be my best option. Even it's not going to do a great job of showing this. See, that shows all the cold air there. Let's go up another scan on this. See, this doesn't even show, a direct pathway northward for solid moisture, even at that level. Gabe, come back on over there for a second. Let's talk about this for a moment. I don't have an obvious moist conveyor showing up on any of these that is super duper crazy pronounced, right? It's just, I have tons of moisture. I don't have tons of moisture. I just have enough moisture with a very wavy upper level pattern continuing to kind of kick out chances for an extended period of time. So it's just a different setup.
It is. It's not the
And
Gulf
different
low.
always
that we
always
usually
is
get.
frustrating and scary because different has high end potential and it has high bust potential as well.
Big time. But I think that getting folks prepared is what's important right now. And so having those ways of staying warm, ways of staying safe, one of the guarantees that we can say with this forecast, it's going to be cold beyond this system, and that's dangerous in its own right. And so just find ways to stay warm. I'm going ahead and me personally getting the gas cans filled just in case and having a generator close by just in case. Not exactly saying that it's going to happen, but at least preparing for these level 3 or level 4 potentials. That's going to be impactful and going to be affecting a lot of folks. So just have ways, have that plan in place, and you'll definitely be on the safe side. And if we're coming out of this saying, dang it, I prepared too much, I would rather be on that aspect than the other end of the spectrum. So as we look at those threats, we're talking level 3 for that accumulating snowfall, as well as some ice and sleet accumulations. Level 3 on both of these, not exactly saying, but all of it's going to happen. It really depends on where you're at, and you're going to get either snow, you're either going to get a mixture, or you're going to get ice, or you're going to get rain. Somewhere in that realm you're going to fall into here in North Mississippi heading into this event, and that's where we expect those travel impacts to be probable, because any of that frozen precip that does fall, then that of course causes those travel impacts. And if you're needing to get out on the road Saturday, temperatures aren't getting above freezing. So if it falls as rainfall, then we're looking at the potential for a freeze overnight and into Saturday. And those freezing temperatures, they stick around into Sunday as well. They stick around and go to a significant drop into Monday morning. So this is going to be impactful through the weekend and even into the start of the week because of that potential for it to stick around with how cold those temperatures are. And that's where we reach that level 4 confidence level on sub-freezing more than 3 days. Honestly, you could argue that that even bumps up to level 5 as of this point. Only reason why it hasn't is because we're still several days out. But that confidence is there. That confidence is climbing heading into tonight. And with how things are favoring moving forward, don't be surprised if these even get bumped up a level as we head into that event. But Matt, this is a time to get prepared, not a time to be scared or anything of that matter. Once we get all that lined up and have our place to go, have ways of staying warm, and as we head into the weekend, just prepare. That's what's important right now as we get into the event. Not the totals, not the accumulation, how we stay safe.
Yeah, absolutely. And so how you stay safe, part of that is obviously staying connected to what we're talking about here, because we do expect this forecast to change significantly over the next few days. One of the main ways in which you can do that is by staying with us here on Mississippi Live. Go ahead and kind of bring it back over here. On the mobile version here for a moment, and a pop up, the QR codes. If you do know somebody who, by the way, before we get on there, I can thank the folks at Room to Room again for sponsoring us here in the Room to Room Weather Center, and all of our sponsors that you've kind of seen up on the screen there. But if you haven't, take a screenshot of this, let friends, let family know. This is the way to stay up with us during winter weather, during severe weather, as we try to answer as many of your questions as we can on what is obviously likely to be a very active pattern over the course of the next few days here. This is the easiest way to kind of find it. And we do expect those alerts, and in particular, the next alert you're probably going to get related to this, outside of a "Hey, we're live" alert, is going to be a winter storm watch. And we expect all locations probably end up under one of those, probably tomorrow, maybe midday, maybe morning. And our meteorologist Maggie McCauley will be tracking the latest related to that, starting at 6:30 a.m. tomorrow here with the very latest on what you can expect. She always is kind of up to date on any travel issues that you have, but there's just going to be rainfall for tomorrow. So it's really how this confidence level changes. The amounts we're talking about, that's something we nail down as we get a little bit closer. So you can check her out for the very latest, again, starting at 6:30 a.m. tomorrow, and really any day of the week, that's where we're at. Our next live broadcast is going to be coming up tonight at 10 p.m. here. Our meteorologist Gabe Maynard, again, we're looking at that snow eater, that warm layer aloft. Maybe I'll be able to get a graphic hack together that we can use related to that to show you where that's most likely. Another one of those things you can see only on Mississippi Live Weather. Appreciate y'all for your support here in the Room to Room Weather Center. We'll see you come up tonight at 10 o'clock.